Causes and consequences of Chernobyl. We have all heard stories about Chernobyl, a place that in 1986 would show the entire planet with much evidence how dangerous radiation can be. The most destructive nuclear accident in history to this day has consequences. Thousands of lives claimed, family genetics entirely modified, altered ecosystems, and a home for tens of thousands taken away. Negligence, combined with lack of knowledge, caused promising communities in economic growth to become scenes of a horror movie. The risk of contaminating radiation not only to their close surrounding, but an entire continent became a possibility. Decades have passed and the worst has been avoided. The media, books, and movies have made us form an idea about the current appearance of Chernobyl and other communities within the zone, which was completely evacuated, known as exclusion zone, covering an area of about 2,600 square kilometers. The exclusion zone, as such, refers to everything that was evacuated when the nuclear accident happened more than 30 years ago. Where is the Chernobyl plant? The Chernobyl nuclear power plant is in Ukraine, 18 kilometers northwest of the city of Chernobyl, 16 kilometers from the border between Ukraine and Belarus, and 110 kilometers north, close to the capital of Ukraine, Kiev, which at that time belonged to the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. The Chernobyl nuclear power plant. The accident occurred on April 26, 1986, at the Vladimir Ilyich Lenin nuclear power plant located in northern Ukraine. On April 25 and 26, 1986, a reactor at a nuclear power plant exploded and burned. Shrouded in secrecy, scientists estimated that the zone around the former plant wouldn't be habitable for 20,000 years. The disaster, which took place near the city of Chernobyl in the former USSR, invested heavily in nuclear power after World War II. Starting in 1977, Soviet scientists installed 4 RBMK nuclear reactors at the power plant. The Chernobyl nuclear power plant that went up in toxic flames in 1986 was encased in a concrete and steel sarcophagus that contained the radioactive material inside. On April 25, 1986, routine maintenance was scheduled at Vladimir Lenin nuclear power station's 4th reactor. The workers planned to use the downtime to test whether the reactor could still be cooled if the plant lost power. During the test, however, workers violated safety protocols and power surged inside the plant. Despite attempts to shut down the reactor entirely, another power surge caused a chain reaction of explosions inside. Finally, the nuclear core itself was exposed, spewing radioactive material into the atmosphere. Firefighters attempt to put out a series of blazes at the plant, and eventually helicopters dumped sand and other materials in an attempt to squelch the fires and contain the contamination. Despite the death of 2 people in the explosions, the hospitalization of workers and firefighters, and the danger from fallout and fire, no one in the surrounding areas, including the nearby city of Pripyat, which was built in 1970s to house workers at the plant, was evacuated until about 36 hours after the disaster began. Causes for the accident. According to many reports, the Chernobyl accident in 1986 was a result of a flawed reactor design that was operated with inadequately trained personnel. The resultant steam, explosion, and fires released at least 5% of the radioactive reactor core into the environment, with the deposition of radioactive materials in many parts of Europe. The Chernobyl nuclear accident was the explosion of reactor number 4 of the Vladimir Ilyich Lenin nuclear power plant, where a test of the inertial range of the turbo generator was carried out, planned since the previous day during the day shift. The Chernobyl accident was a combination of a bad design of the nuclear power plant, which also did not have a containment room, together with the errors produced by the operators of the same. Reasons for the accident. The reason for the Chernobyl nuclear accident was the explosion of reactor number 4 of the Vladimir Ilyich Lenin nuclear power plant, where a test of the inertial range of the turbo generator was carried out, planned since the previous day during the day shift. Consequences. The Chernobyl nuclear accident resulted in a subsequent fire. This fire increased the dispersal effects of radioactive products, and the thermal energy accumulated by the graphite further magnified the fire itself and the atmospheric dispersion. Radioactive contamination of the environment. The Chernobyl accident caused a large regional release of radionuclides into the atmosphere and subsequent radioactive contamination of the environment. Many European countries were affected by the radioactive contamination. Among the most affected were 3 former republics of the Soviet Union: New Belarus, the Russian Federation, and Ukraine. The deposited radionuclides gradually decayed and moved within and among the environments: atmospheric, aquatic, terrestrial, and urban. The soil. Currently, the concern about soil contamination with strontium-90 and cesium-137, which have half-lives of approximately 30 years, tests conducted around 1997 have shown that levels of cesium-137 in trees in the area have continued to rise. The forests. At the entrance to the exclusion zone, you can see kilometers and kilometers of a forest full of trees. With the passage of time, nature has borne the cities. Some shops or schools can be seen devastated, and nature appears in each of those premises. The growth of the ecosystem is shocking as a result of the abandonment of the human being. Within so much chaos, we cannot avoid reflecting on the power of nature and how easy it is to generate if only we stop exploiting it. Water resource. There is life in the waters of Chernobyl, like rivers, and there is a lot of variety of fish in the water, but the fish that are there cannot be eaten. Health consequences of the Chernobyl accident in the former Soviet Union. After the Chernobyl reactor accident, the emergency forces as well as the local population were exposed to high levels of radiation. Considerable radiation exposures to the population were recorded, particularly in the areas of present-day Russia, Belarus, and Ukraine. The Chernobyl Forum, a working group made of several UN organizations and the governments of Russia, Belarus, and Ukraine, promoted the progress of the scientific evaluation of the consequences of the reactor accident for humans and the environment from 2003 to 2005. The health consequences are still being investigated to this day. What are the effects of radiation? The radiation energy is absorbed by the molecules of the cell. This energy has the effect of ejecting electrons from the molecules, ionization, or breaking bonds in the molecules. The resulting molecule types, radicals, are very reactive chemically and can be electrically charged or electrically neutral. These radicals react with the other molecules inside the cell, which may then directly or indirectly lead to cell damage. In most cases, water molecules are affected. However, other substances inside the cell can be affected as well, such as proteins or the DNA carrier molecules of genetic information. The reactor after the explosion. When a reactor at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant exploded and burned 33 years ago, it generated a radioactive cloud that contaminated parts of the Soviet Union and Europe before dissipating. It took years and the back-breaking labor of hundreds of thousands of conscripted workers to contain the mess. More than 30 plant workers and firefighters were killed, most from radiation, and untold thousands more suffered health effects. 1,000 square miles of territory remain off limits due to radioactive contamination. Conclusion. The accident at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant was not only the most serious in the history of civil nuclear energy, but also set a record in terms of population exposure to radiation and marked a before and after in the atomic energy industry. The accident occurred in the very early morning of 26 April 1986, when operators ran a test on an electric control system of Unit 4. The accident happened because of a combination of basic engineering deficiencies in the reactor and faulty actions of the operators. The safety systems had been switched off, and the reactor was being operated under improper, unstable conditions, a situation that allowed an uncontrollable power surge to occur. This power surge caused the nuclear fuel to overheat and led to a series of steam explosions and severely damaged the reactor building and destroyed the Unit 4 reactor in this case.